Welcome to the heart of the wilderness, where nature's beauty conceals lurking horrors. I am your guide, your Mistress Midnight, and tonight we venture into the chilling unknown with 3 bone-chilling camping stories. Amidst a secluded campsite, uninvited guests emerge, their presence entwined with secrets lurking deeper than the night. A story best told by a campfire. This is The Unwanted Campers.
Sarah and I, both 25 years old and craving a break from the daily grind, had long grown weary of the bustling and noisy campgrounds we'd frequented in the past. So we embarked on a mission to seek out solitude, searching for a secluded, dispersed camping spot deep within the heart of the national forest. Our hearts brimmed with anticipation as we yearned for that quiet haven where we could truly connect with the serenity of nature. Our first night was everything we had hoped for. We arrived at the perfect spot and set up our little tent. The sun was starting to set below the trees, casting long shadows, and we hurried to get a campfire going. We didn't even eat dinner, we just went straight to roasting marshmallows and shared stories under the starry night. The sound and warmth of the fire was the perfect setting and just what we needed. The forest was beautiful and quiet, but as the night went on, a spooky feeling started to come over us. We wanted peace and quiet, which was what we came for, but it also felt strange and creepy. Besides the usual forest sounds like leaves rustling, owls hooting, and coyotes in the distance, there was something else, something weird. It was like a faint whisper in the wind, hard to notice but impossible to ignore. We snuggled closer to the fire, trying to shake off the uneasiness that clung to us like a damp fog. It felt like something or someone was lurking in the shadows, just beyond our reach. We couldn't pinpoint it, but we were letting nature get to us. Funny how your imagination gets the best of you. I could tell my girlfriend was getting a little freaked out by all the dark, open space, so I suggested we call it a night and get some sleep. We made our way to the tent and snuggled up inside our warm sleeping bags. With a sigh of relief, we finally fell asleep, comforted by the sounds of the night. We trusted that the daylight would show us the forest in a friendlier, more familiar way. The next morning arrived, and we woke up to the gentle sounds of the forest, birds singing and the sun breaking through the trees. After breakfast, we decided to explore the woods and spent a beautiful day connecting with nature. It was a long day of adventure, and exactly what we needed. As evening came, my girlfriend made us dinner and I started arranging the logs for the night's campfire. The flickering flames casting dancing shadows that felt warm and inviting. It was a magical night. But then, in the dim twilight, something unexpected happened. A car engine roared in the distance, and the piercing beams of headlights cut through the forest. I thought we had picked a spot where we would be alone. What a bummer. We both turned to see a late-night camper pulling up and setting up their camp not far from us. They didn't exchange a word, or even a friendly nod. They just pitched their tent and began their evening rituals. It felt weird, this intrusion on our private slice of nature, but we decided to let it be and hope that they would keep to themselves. It was getting late, so we decided to call it a night. Little did we know, this was only the beginning of the unnerving experiences that awaited us. Morning sunlight filtered through the forest canopy, bringing with it a sense of calm and familiarity that dispelled the unsettling experiences of the previous night. We awoke to the chirping of birds and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. It was as if the weirdness had been erased by the dawn's first light. We looked over towards the area where the car had pulled up the night before, and there was no one there. Whoever had stopped to camp near us was no longer there. We thought that was odd, but figured they wanted their own space too, and left to find a more private area. Eager to explore and embrace the beauty of the wilderness, we set off on a nature hike. The forest embraced us, the trail meandering through towering trees, sunlight dappling the ground. As the day went by, our concerns melted away. We shared stories and laughter, soaked in the wonders of the natural world, and allowed ourselves to be immersed in the serenity of the forest. It was everything we had longed for, and for a while, we nearly forgot about the late-night camper who had intruded upon our solitude. As we returned to our campsite, we noticed an unusual stillness in the air. an unsettling absence of sound. Even the wind had stilled, and the rustling leaves seemed to have hushed. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting. The peaceful forest we'd come to enjoy was disrupted yet again, when two strange men showed up. They came out of the trees and set up their camp not far from us. These guys didn't look like typical campers we'd seen before. They seemed a bit messy and didn't talk much. Their presence gave us an uneasy feeling as if something was off. We couldn't help but exchange worried glances. What are the chances that we would have two different campers invade our secluded campsite? They kept mostly to themselves, working on their campsite without saying a word. It was an uncomfortable and awkward situation, like a shadow had fallen over our camp. The forest, which was once tranquil, now had a weird vibe. We debated whether to go over and say hello, but their presence was so strange that we didn't feel comfortable doing so. As night fell, we found ourselves huddled by the campfire. Its flickering light offered a fragile sense of security against the encroaching darkness. The two peculiar men in the neighboring campsite seemed even more out of place in the muted glow of the fire. Their presence cast a long shadow over the tranquility of the wilderness. Hours passed and strange occurrences began to unfold. Faint whispers drifted from the direction of the odd campers, barely audible and impossible to understand. It was like a language of its own, composed of hushed murmurs and sighs. We strained to decipher it, but it remained a cryptic mystery. The shadows around their campsite took on strange, almost unnatural shapes, as if the darkness itself harbored some eerie intent. Most unnerving of all, we noticed symbols etched into the trees near their camp, strange symbols that we couldn't make heads or tails of. It sent a shiver down our spines. Each strange event heightened our sense of fear and unease. Our own campsite, once a sanctuary of solitude, no longer felt like a safe place. The quiet and serene isolation we'd initially sought now felt like a haunting seclusion. The night was long and terrifying. We couldn't shake the eerie feeling that had taken hold of our campsite. Every little sound made our hearts race, and the darkness felt like it held secrets we didn't want to uncover. As we huddled by the campfire, the tension was unbearable. We couldn't escape the unsettling presence of the two men in the neighboring campsite. They continued their strange behavior, their whispers growing more sinister. At this point, we started to wonder if we were just tired and freaking out over nothing. Maybe our imagination was getting the best of us, and we just needed to get some sleep. We put out the little fire that was left and made our way to the tent. Then, as the night reached its darkest point, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It came from the direction of the odd men's campsite, and our blood ran cold. We stayed frozen in our spots, too afraid to move or make a sound. The scream was followed by a deathly silence. The forest seemed to be holding its breath as if waiting for something. We didn't know what to do, and the terror was suffocating. Morning finally broke, putting an end to that long, terrifying night. We were on edge the entire time, and the forest felt like it was hiding something from us. As dawn's light crept through the trees, we felt a mixture of relief and dread. Something horrible had happened at the odd men's campsite. Their blood-curdling scream was etched in our minds, but the forest now held its secrets close. We were too scared to investigate or find out what had occurred. When we finally mustered the courage to check, the strange campers were gone. Their campsite was empty, as if they'd never been there. It was as if the forest had swallowed them up. We didn't stay a moment longer. We packed our things and left the eerie forest behind. The unsettling memory of that night, the terrifying scream, and the strange campers stayed with us. Maybe those busy campgrounds aren't so bad after all.
In this story, we explore fear, friendship, and the mystery of the wild. This is the Wild Pursuit.
My best friend, Craig, and I, both in our 20s, were always up for an adventure. We decided to embark on a backpacking trip deep into the wilderness, far away from the hustle and bustle of city life. We had our backpacks packed and our spirits high, eager to explore the untouched beauty of nature. The journey into the wilderness was a dream come true. Towering trees, clear streams, and the sounds of chirping birds surrounded us. It felt like we were the only people in the world. We hiked for miles, carrying our hopes and dreams on our backs, ready to make memories. The first night in the wilderness was peaceful, with the stars shining bright above us. We quickly fell asleep, but our peace was short-lived. I woke up to the sound of rustling leaves and found a stranger near our campsite. Startled, we tried to talk to him, but he didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed my water bottle and disappeared into the night, leaving us shaken. The night was too dark for us to go after him safely, so we attempted to dismiss the incident. However, the fear had already taken root in our hearts, and getting a good night's sleep became a challenging task. As the next night came, the persistent feeling of being watched clung to us. The next morning, we'd wake up to find our gear rearranged, stumble upon enigmatic footprints encircling our campsite, and catch eerie laughter in the distance. We questioned why this stranger would torment us, but by this point, we were deep into our trail, making it impractical to turn back. Pushing forward was the best option, albeit nerve-wracking option. The stranger's presence became more menacing. He'd leave cryptic messages written in the dirt and steal small items like our food, maps, and even our extra clothes. Every time we'd catch a glimpse of him, he'd vanish into the trees like a ghost. We had no choice but to pack up and keep moving, fearing that staying in one place would make us an easy target. It felt like the stranger was always a step behind us, chasing us through the wilderness. We knew there was a small ranger cabin further up the trail. It wasn't always manned, but it seemed like the best idea. Hopefully, we would find safety and help. The journey to the ranger station was a harrowing ordeal. Every sound, every rustle of leaves made our hearts race. It was as if the forest itself conspired with the stranger to keep us in a state of terror. We were experienced backpackers and making good time. Just when we thought we had lost him, he reappeared, blocking our path. We were forced to confront him, knowing that it was our only way to safety. As we approached, he stepped aside and we hurried past him, not daring to look back. As it started getting dark, we saw the ranger's cabin in the distance. A comforting light glowed from its windows, giving us hope that the ranger might be inside, ready to help us. Our steps quickened as we approached the cabin. We knocked on the door, our hearts pounding with anticipation, but there was no answer. The door was locked and we started to freak out. Just when we were about to give up hope, we saw a shadowy figure coming out of the trees. We were scared, thinking he must have caught up to us. But as the figure got closer, we saw it was the ranger, not the guy who had been bothering us. We felt so relieved. We told the ranger about everything we had been through. The ranger listened carefully, and at that moment, it felt like we had discovered a haven in the midst of a storm. Our adventure in the wilderness had changed us profoundly. The fear we had experienced because of that stranger had forever altered our view of the beautiful, remote landscapes. It was as if the fear had stained the wild beauty, leaving an indelible mark of unease and uncertainty. We never knew who the stranger was or what his intentions were, and that lingering fear would forever be etched in our memories of that backpacking trip.
Amidst the tranquil woods, a mother and daughter grapple with grief in an old, secluded cabin. In a tale that tugs at the heartstrings, this is Dad's Cabin.
It had been a few months since Dad passed away. We were all hurting, especially Mom and me. So we decided to take a break, get away from it all. We packed our bags and headed for a small cabin in the Rocky Mountains, a place where Dad had taken us many times when we were kids. The cabin was just as I remembered, a cozy little place surrounded by towering trees and a pristine lake. I thought this was camping, but I guess it's really more like glamping. It was a place that held so many memories of family outings and happy moments. We hoped to find solace and healing here. The first few days were bittersweet. We shared stories of Dad, laughed, and cried. But then, things started getting eerie. At night, the once familiar sounds of the cabin began to transform into something unrecognizable. Soft whispers seemed to curl around the walls, just beyond the edge of understanding. Footsteps echoed in the darkness, muffled yet persistent. as if someone were tiptoeing on creaky old floorboards. The shadows in the corners of the room were no longer just innocent tricks of the light. They seemed to take on a life of their own, dancing and contorting, playing sinister games with our imagination. I couldn't help but question my senses. Was it simply the cabin's ancient wood settling, or were there secrets hidden within its time-worn walls? With each passing night, the disconcerting sounds and eerie shadows grew more pronounced. They cast a creeping chill over our once tranquil refuge, leaving us to wonder if the cabin held more than just memories and woodwork. I was scared, unsure whether it was my imagination or something genuinely otherworldly at play. As days went by, the strange happenings intensified, casting a pall of fear over our otherwise somber retreat. The night sounds became an eerie symphony of whispers and creaks, so uncannily synchronized that they felt orchestrated. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was amiss within the cabin's weathered walls. The cabin's old wood groaned and squealed, yet it wasn't just the sounds that sent shivers down my spine. It was the feeling that our every move was being watched by unseen eyes. The flickering candlelight played tricks on my eyes, casting elongated and distorted shadows that seemed to dance to a malevolent rhythm, like spectral beings trying to communicate something beyond our comprehension. The nights took on a life of their own, as if the very essence of the cabin had become a living, breathing entity with its own secrets. I was undeniably scared, and it became increasingly difficult to discern if it was merely my grief and fear playing tricks on my mind, or if something truly sinister was lurking within those four walls. The cabin, once a haven of cherished memories, had transformed into an enigma wrapped in darkness, testing the limits of our sanity. One night, when I was feeling particularly scared, I imagined a comforting presence in the room, almost like Dad's. It felt like he was watching over us, shielding us from the overwhelming grief and fear that had taken hold of the cabin. The next night, I stood up to face my fear, whatever it was. It was like I was confronting my own doubts and grief. And in that moment, the cabin felt different. The unsettling things I'd been sensing seemed to dissipate. It was as if facing my inner turmoil had banished the shadows and whispers. With newfound courage and a deeper connection with Mom, we left the cabin with a sense of closure. It was still a place of memories, some painful and others heartwarming. We learned that sometimes our fears and grief can play tricks on us, but with love and strength, we can confront and overcome them. The cabin in the Rockies will always hold memories of pain and healing, but it's also a place where we found solace, comfort, and the strength to face our inner demons and fears.
As the embers of this moonlit night wane, and we bid farewell to the chilling tales of the wilderness, I am Mistress Midnight, your guide through the macabre, urging you to stay haunted and embrace the darkness until we meet again. Good night, and may the stars keep your nightmares at bay.